Ah, the train station. The liminal space we put up with whenever we choose to travel by train. It's one of those things that you don't really give much thought to, unless of course your station is either exceptionally good or exceptionally bad for one reason or another. However, with more thought being given to the idea that trains are actually a really good idea in this country, one of the places that needs consideration is what makes a good train station and what makes a bad train station. And of course, attempt to try and learn not to make the stations bad. And as it just so happens, I live around Philadelphia, a city that has some of the absolute best train stations in the country and some of the absolute worst train stations in the country. And the bad stuff around here is what I'm here to point out today. Because frankly, while there are certainly good, even amazing stations that deserve their own video later on, a lot of stations here are definitely bad, and there's quite a range of them too, from the irritating to the horrendous or the outright pointless. And if we look at some of the worst examples, we can start to understand what to do to make the system truly great at the places where people start to interact with it. Also, it is fun to yell about them. So with that being said, I think it's good to elaborate on this point by going over a personal top 10 list that I've created of the worst train stations of Philadelphia's regional rail network. A few things to note before we start though, these are just my opinions, and if you have some that you think are worse, let me know in the comments. This is also going to be for the regional rail network of SEPTA specifically. Maybe subway stations will be their own thing later on, but for now, we're just looking at regional rail here. Plus, adding the subways could be argued to just be cheating. But let's start by stating what my criteria is for a bad station. There are two main things that I'll be critiquing the stations on: the practical considerations and the atmospheric considerations. Practical considerations are things like the facilities and accessibility for passengers, and the atmospheric ones are basically just vibes. But hey, vibes are important to some people, so yeah, you have to talk about them if you want any meaningfully good stuff to happen. But before we get started in earnest, it's time for me to say the traditional YouTuber stuff. Like and share the video if you enjoyed it. If you want to see more, click subscribe. And if you feel like my stuff is worth contributing to, I have both a Patreon and a Buy Me a Coffee, link in the description below. I have some ideas for Patreon exclusive content if you want to check it out, so keep an eye out for that. So with that said, let's have a look at the 10 worst train stations in Philadelphia. Number 10, Tacony. Well, do we start off this one strong, or weak depending on your viewpoint. Tacony is a stop on the Trenton line, one of two lines of the network using the high-speed Northeast Corridor. But it seems that even back in the heyday of Philly's railroads, this station never really got much respect. Perhaps endemic of the thoughts that go into this part of Philadelphia as a whole, sadly. It's a shame too, since it's not hard to see the station being much better for the neighborhood that it serves. When it comes to the station itself, it suffers from a common ailment of many stations on this list: ground level platforms, which means no level boarding, and the waiting shelter is this piece of junk. Sadly, it isn't much different to how it used to be in the so-called glory days, since these stations were always made cheaply. But annoyingly, there are a few obstacles when it comes to making this station better. Being on a line owned by Amtrak, SEPTA would need to coordinate with them to make something happen here, even if it's just for SEPTA trains. Considering the violent allergy that transit agencies have in this country with working together on anything really, unless it's seen as an important project in which they're forced to collab, that leaves this station wanting for now. But the really bloody annoying thing has to do with the part of the line that it's on. The Northeast Corridor is a rail line well known for its sections of quad tracking, which is the case on most of the Trenton line. This is not one of those places, but not for the reason you're probably thinking. This isn't a case where there's only 3 or even 2 tracks on a line that should have 4. The problem is, there is a 5th track right next to the outbound platform. This track is not electrified, and therefore it cannot be used by SEPTA trains or even Amtrak trains. Instead, this track is used by local freight trains. But wait a minute, wouldn't that mean that the SEPTA trains would have to stop one track over? and force passengers to walk across an active track to get to the platform? Yes, it does. Obviously, that's not really great from an accessibility or safety standpoint. Pretty easy to see that this, coupled with its shelter, which can be best described as bad as a bad bus shelter, if even that, put Tacony squarely towards the bottom in terms of user friendliness. So, why isn't this station higher on the list, you may ask? Well, aside from the fact that there are stations genuinely worse in terms of usability somehow, this station kinda wins back some points on vibes. The obvious downfall of the vibes here is the soundscape, because I-95 is a block away from here on the outbound side. On the inbound side though, things are definitely a lot better. This station can truly live up to its role as a neighborhood station, since it's easily within walking distance of many potential passengers. And to get there, they pass through the main thing that saves the station's vibe. The passengers coming to the station from Keystone Street walk through a public park to get to the station, the Crystal Lewis Memorial Park. And honestly, it's a perfectly fine park. Nice grass, nice trees, a basketball court, some good stuff here. So there are some things that can help it be better than some, but it's not enough to keep Tacony off the full list. Also, if you think this is the only station on the Trenton line or the NEC in general, then you're dead wrong, my friend. Foreshadowing is a narrative device in which... Number 9. Angora. Moving over to my home line, the Media Wawa line, we move to what is undoubtedly its most disappointing station. Angora is the second station out from the main core of the SEPTA network, and serves its namesake neighborhood in southwest Philadelphia. But honestly, if it wasn't for the conductors or the announcements calling it as such, you'd probably think this wasn't a station at all. It's just a couple of strips of pavement on each side of the tracks, no shelter unless you count the bridge carrying 58th Street over the tracks, and no structure of any substance here. And it's not like it has an excuse. Just look at this. You look me dead in the eye and tell me you can't have a proper station here. I dare you. You know, it's almost as if stations within Philadelphia itself are systemically neglected on this network, and that SEPTA is a transit agency that has historically seen its regional rail system as being meant for suburbanites and little else, rather than, I don't know, something that can actually serve people reliably wherever it goes, whether in the city or the suburbs. Oh, and also, no wheelchair ramps either, because of course there isn't. Is it any wonder why this station is apparently the second least used station on the regional rail network? And don't worry, we'll get to the least used one later. Ultimately, the main thing that prevents me from putting this one any higher is the fact that it isn't an obvious safety hazard like certain other stations on this list are, and that, like Tacony, this station is close to a lot of houses and shops, and has easily some pretty decent rail connections, since it's only a block away from Baltimore Avenue, where the T2 trolley service, formerly the Route 34, can take you into the city via University City if you so wish, or if your train gets screwed over like ours did here. I think the fact the station can be so obviously better than what it is now, and pretty easily, and I wager for pretty cheap too, is the reason that it frustrates me so much. West Philly deserves a much better train station, and one that's far more used than this. Number 8. Highland Avenue. Highland Avenue, not to be confused with Highland, which is another crappy station in a much posher neighborhood, is a strange beast to say the least. Located in the outskirts of Chester on the Wilmington-Newark line, the other SEPTA service using the Northeast Corridor, Highland Avenue is sort of Chester's shoulder station as opposed to the larger Chester Transportation Center just up the line. But like most things related to Chester, it just gets completely screwed over. At least Chester Transportation Center is getting better, but Highland Ave? I don't even think a lot of people in Chester realize this station exists. Aside from being in Chester, which hurts the vibes for the place for most people, which is sad because I've always had a soft spot for Chester and as a city getting deliberately screwed over by vicious real estate practices, the station's platforms are just made out of wood. Not concrete, not even asphalt, just wood. Yeah. At least it's got some benches and a shelter that's literally just an old bus shelter. So, yeah, not a very appealing place to wait for your train. And following a trend that you may notice in this video, no accessibility at all either. They're low-level platforms, and the only way to get up to them are stairs, and some pretty big ones considering the embankment that the station is built on. Also, the platforms are not even the length of a single car on the train. Pretty cramped, all things considered. This one may be trickier to fix, but it's far from impossible, and it'd be worth it to do as well, especially if you ever want to prove to the people of Chester that you give the square root of a damn about their city. And all the more so if you ever want to improve service on the Wilmington-Newark line as SEPTA wants to, though not nearly as much as they should want to. And yet, just like plenty of other stations on this list, it's not earmarked for improvement anytime soon. What a travesty. Number 7. Daylesford. Whoa, wait a minute. Daylesford? Isn't that one of the rich suburbs along the main line? Yes, it is. But you wouldn't know that just looking at the train station that serves it. Just look at this. No, your eyes are not deceiving you. The platform on the outbound side at this station on the Paoli-Thorndale line, the busiest line on the regional rail system, is not a platform at all. It's 3 little platforms made of wooden planks. Absolute disgrace. The inbound platform isn't that much better either. Low platform, no ramps, and a shelter that only technically exists but isn't what I would call good, especially in the early spring when we filmed this when it gets kinda windy. It just goes to show that even stations on this network that serves people that the regional rail systems historically cater to can be complete junk. And it's not like the vibes around here help much either. I mean, sure, you got some big single-family houses around here, if that's your thing, a school, a row house complex, and some offices and shops nearby, but those things, part and parcel of the main line, is completely cut in twain not just by the line itself, but by this. That's Lancaster Avenue, also known as US Highway 30. Hope you like the sound of traffic, you poor bastards. But hey, at least there's a bus that connects to this station, the Route 106 from 69th Street to Paoli. Oh wait, that's getting axed as part of the bus rework. Well, shit. Oh, and hey, grimy underpass. This is the only way to get from one side of the tracks to the other, by the way. But hey, since this station is on the busiest route on the SEPTA network, and in a market that the Luddites in the Regional Rail Division care about serving, surely this station is slated for updates, right? Nope, none planned. And it's not like there's no rolling plan for station improvements or anything sensible like that. There is one, it's just stupidly glacial due to SEPTA's perpetual brokenness and lack of ambition, with upgrades at some of the most important stations on the network happening as late as the mid-2030s. I'm staring right at you, Glenside. And some just don't have plans at all like Daylesford. Call this video a wake-up call. Everybody, and I mean everybody, suffers when public transit sucks in a big city. And I mean that. Even the rich people who go to Daylesford, who probably just use it to avoid the parking mess at Paoli, which is understandable if I'm honest. As has been pointed out by my associate, we have a lot of handicapped accessible parking spots, but no handicapped accessible station. Because reasons.
ADA says fuck you.
Pretty much. Number 6. Link Belt. Pretty much by definition, the least used station on a transit network needs to go on the worst list. It's the least used station for a reason, and that's very much the case here at SEPTA Regional Rail's least used station, Link Belt, on the Lansdale-Doylestown line. Though it's definitely for very weird reasons. Link Belt is the least used station on the network for one massive reason. You can't really use it. Like, nearly at all. It only exists for one purpose, and that is to serve Dorman Industries, which is of all things an aftermarket auto parts factory across the road from it. And there's no parking for it either. There's just a kiss and ride, which I initially mistook for parking when I looked at it, and even when I wrote the original draft of the script. Now, for a stop in the city, that sort of arrangement is perfectly fine, but what out in the middle of sprawl, suburbia, and farmland where you're required to own a car in order to survive? That's really questionable. Oh, and you can't really walk here either, unless you work at the factory. The only, and I mean only way you can get there is a single solitary crosswalk crossing Walnut Street, which isn't really a street, it's a road, and literally nothing else. Walnut Street, no not that one, has no sidewalks either, and the station has no footbridge crossing the tracks, so you can't easily do a sneaky and park your car in the parking lot for the fittingly, ironically named Whistle Stop Park and board the train. Not least without looking like a complete lunatic anyway. And even if you wanted to, why? Because there's Colmar Station, a perfectly good park and ride station not even half a mile away from here. It really makes you wonder what the point of this station even is anymore, especially when it only gets 23 riders a day on average. That's it. So that makes one wonder, why isn't the station towards the top or even number 1? Well, that's hilariously simple. This station is actually accessible. That's right, this dinky flag stop that gets the same amount of people per day that a sensible train station would get in 5 minutes was actually upgraded in the 2000s to be fully ADA accessible, with a real high-level platform and ramps to access it. Sure, the platform's only 1 car long, but compared to pretty much every other station on this list, that's a massive upgrade. There's also a shelter on it too, which is okay. Honestly, more than I think I would expect for a stop as questionable in its existence as this. So much so that trains just straight up don't stop here on weekends because the factory is closed. But if someone's using it, I guess it has a purpose to serve, right? Who am I to judge? Okay, screw it, I'm judging it. What even is the point of Link Belt anymore? Number 5, Curtis Park. It's back south to the Wilmington-Newark line again, which frankly is a line with a lot of contenders for the top spots. They're just that bad. But that being said, out of a sorry list of stations, most of them I would easily put in honorable mentions, Curtis Park always struck me as one of the saddest examples. Located in Sharon Hill, not even a minute down the line from Sharon Hill Station on the route into Center City, Curtis Park is one of those poster child stations for one that is run down and ramshackle. As is par for the course with these bad stations, no high platforms and no accessibility ramps. But again, far from impossible. You just need to get some money and a semblance of sympathy for this place. And to work with Amtrak. Again, an annoying and opaque arrangement. Story for another time. But for me, the thing that puts this station above the rest is that this station both has a pedestrian underpass going under the tracks and something that resembles a station building, but looks more like a rundown and abandoned corner store. Look at this. Just look at this. This is just sad.
So, station's been closed, obviously, but it's been closed for so fucking long that SEPTA has put signs on the window boarding.
Because this boarding is not original.
Yes.
Not at all. Jesus,
That's hollow.
yeah. That's clearly where a window used to be.
Why is there a branch?
That's not even a branch, that's nearly a whole ass tree. And it's not like the underpass is much better either. Mildewy and kinda gross. I don't expect much from pedestrian underpasses in any case, they're usually kind of uninviting, but this one just had a bit more to it that really makes me not like it all the harder. And what's sad to me is that you can see the futurist design of the canopies here, like a holdover for when the station first opened in 1949. Definitely a more optimistic time for this place. But as I keep reiterating to the point that I'll sound like a broken record by the end of this, making this place better is far from impossible. From a technical perspective, it's really easy. It's always the money and the will, not much else. And sadly, it seems like there isn't much will for Curtis Park yet. I hold out hope, though. Number 4, North Broad. Oh, how the mighty have fallen. That's really the only way I can adequately describe the travesty that happened to North Broad Station over the last few decades. North Broad is where it says it is, on North Broad Street in North Philadelphia. And from the looks of it, you would never guess how important and impressive this station used to be. But you can get a feeling for it by looking at this building, which is next to the tracks. This is what North Broad Station used to be. No, I am not kidding. This grand and beautiful station, one of the most important stations in Philadelphia for the Reading Company during the golden age of rail, a station that served the Reading's flagship trains like the Crusader, went from this to this. going from 2 island platforms serving all 4 tracks of the main trunk of the SEPTA network to just this. 2 side platforms which, while they have ramps, are still far from being anything resembling good. Also, because of this configuration and the diminishment of this station, it's gone from serving all trains on the network back in SEPTA's attempted S-Bahn days, back to only having 2 lines serve it, the Manayunk-Norristown and Lansdale-Doylestown lines. And frankly, it's not hard to see why the drop in ridership happened here. This place has pretty much been left derelict. You know, a lot of people like to argue about the causes of the gains or losses of transit ridership as if it were a chicken and egg scenario. But North Broad, and at least one other station on this list that I'll get to, is a prime example of the common reality, which is that we've smashed all of the eggs and then we wonder where all the chickens have gone. I think the main reason this station pisses me off is that it's a surviving example of one of SEPTA's biggest mistakes with their regional rail network. Particularly in the 1980s and 90s, a lot of stations that served neighborhoods within Philadelphia itself were closed, and some like North Broad were downscaled, all on the altar of being perceived to be useful to the 9-to-5 office worker in Center City who lives in the suburbs. Here's a reality check. This is not how any world-class or successful transit system does it. I can look at 2 systems I rode in Europe last year, the Copenhagen S-Tog and the Pendeltåg trains in Stockholm, and they're used as both commuter rail for the suburbanites and rapid transit for the people in the city, augmented further in the city by their metro and bus systems. It turns out you can do both. You should do both because everybody wins, particularly if the services are frequent and reliable. And aside from Copenhagen and Stockholm, just look at systems like the RER in Paris, the Elizabeth Line and Thameslink in London, and of course, the German S-Bahn systems that SEPTA's network took deep inspiration from in the 1980s. Every single one of them has stations that serve the city and its people outside of the CBD. In Philly, a lot of those stations were lost, and North Broad gets cut down to this, as if to serve as a reminder of what happened to these places. You had something amazing, and you blew it up. God damn you. If one day stations like North Broad and some of the lost stations, which will probably be a subject of their own video, ever come back, that may be the surest sign yet that the transit system will truly start to heal. But for now, we can only lament in sheer frustration. North Broad did not deserve this. Number 3, Bridesburg. If you want a poster child of how low American standards truly are when it comes to train stations we use every day, the one that always comes to mind to me immediately is here at Bridesburg on the Trenton line. Why? Look at it. Yes, that's the station. This slapped together piece of junk that SEPTA would have rejected as a bus stop and thrown in the dumpster is their excuse for a train station for Bridesburg. And by extension, Frankfurt and Wissenoming, because those neighborhood stations also closed back in the 80s and 90s. As for the platforms, yeah, the inbound one is just wood, and the outbound one is asphalt. At least when you're able to reach that one anyway. You might have noticed that this train is once again stopping one track over from the platform, and that's for a familiar reason. This station has literally the same problem with the track layout as Tacony back at number 10 on the list. In fact, this is the stop just before Tacony heading out of the city, and that means that there's an unelectrified freight track that prevents passengers from going directly from the train to the platform. So yeah, you can think of this station as essentially Tacony but with far worse vibes. You got both the noise from I-95 and Aramingo Avenue to deal with somehow even worse facilities and no nice park to even it out, and therefore it really drives this place further up the list. This station is pretty much the poster child for how low you can possibly go with station standards in the US. But it's not number 1 because the final 2 are somehow even worse. Number 2, Eddington. I'm pretty sure a lot of people in the know wholeheartedly expected this station on the Trenton line to be towards the top of the list, maybe even number 1, and that's for a very good reason. Eddington takes literally everything wrong with stations like Tacony, Curtis Park, and Bridesburg and adds an extra ingredient to the concoction of misery. That being, and I mean this with no exaggeration, this station is almost completely and utterly pointless. First of all, the facilities, worse somehow than Bridesburg. At least Bridesburg had something resembling a platform. This one is just patches of gravel. Literal patches of gravel. That's it. There apparently used to be an actual station building here, but in perhaps the most foreshadowing event I can think of for this place, it burned down in a suspected arson attack in 1956, and somehow it's only gotten worse since. Oh, and you know that 5th freight track problem at Tacony and Bridesburg? Well, we're miles away from those places, and it's still an issue here. This time for a track serving as a local freight spur for industries in the area. And speaking of industry, that's literally the only thing of significance around here. Maybe a couple of houses penned in by said industries, but that's about it. But that's still better than the situation at Linkbelt we talked about earlier, and it's likely why Eddington is not the least used station on the SEPTA network. It's the 6th least used apparently. Even Angora gets less riders. It's still not what you would call great, only 58 people a day use this station, which if I'm honest is pretty impressive for two main reasons. SEPTA themselves don't expect this station to have people at it a lot of the time, and it's nearly impossible to get here. For the first point, I used to think that this station was just a flag stop like Linkbelt, and while that may have been the case historically, every train I filmed while I was here stopped, even when there was no one at the platform. However, the busy rush hour express trains don't stop here, and the local trains that do often roll into the platform with the trapdoors on the cars left up, like in this clip here, which is a sign that the conductors don't expect to pick people up at this stop a lot of the time. And on top of that, this is the least usable station on the network. For one, there is literally no parking here. The closest parking lot is one for a ladder factory next door, and I'm pretty sure that's just for employees. You could probably walk here if you lived around here, but on the side of the tracks where there are actual houses, there are almost no sidewalks, and you have to walk along an actual fast road to get here, one with a 50-mile-an-hour speed limit, which is fun. And as for getting here from the other side of the tracks, forget it. I-95 exists, and it takes up a ton of the station's catchment area. And again, unlike the next stop down the line at Cornwell's Heights, there's nowhere for those poor unfortunate souls on I-95 to park here. And yet, despite all of this station has a bus line that serves it. No, you didn't mishear me. In fact, to get here, I took that bus, the 133 from City Line Loop on Frankfurt Avenue to get here. In fact, this is where the 133 terminates after stopping at Cornwell's Heights. This bus is a rush hour only bus, weekdays only, so it's definitely not something that can be relied on to get here for a lot of people. Now, sure, this area deserves a good bus service, but the fact that the bus terminates here rather than at a more substantial station like, say, Croydon just up the line is just baffling to me. Why? And just like most stations on this list, Eddington is not slated for any improvement. In fact, there's a rumor going around that after the rebuild of Cornwell's Heights station that is in the design stage right now is complete, Eddington could actually close down as a station. I do have to stress that there's nothing confirmed on that front, it's just rumors I've heard, but it kind of wouldn't shock me. Unlike a lot of other stations on this list, I just don't see a meaningful future for Eddington Station. Just improve the 133 and run it to Croydon, and you could definitely fill the transit need here. Maybe I could be proven wrong, but considering how few people use this station and how few people can use it, I have my doubts, and honestly, I don't think it would be particularly missed. Well, before we get to number 1, let me get into some dishonorable mentions. First, there's Eastwick, the only intermediate station on the airport line. This station, for the most part, is garbage, just a slap-together affair with wooden platforms at a low level, and again, just old bus shelters for any sort of protection, and the ability to use the station isn't really helped by the surrounding areas, particularly close to the airport. However, Eastwick doesn't make the full list for one reason. It actually is accessible, and it has wheelchair ramps. That's more than I can say for the overwhelming majority of bad stations. Next, there's Norristown Main Street, easily the worst of the 3 stations in Norristown on the regional rail. At least it's useful to people living in Norristown itself, so it at least has a purpose. But compared to Norristown Transportation Center or Norristown Elm Street, it's definitely the weakest of the 3. But it's at least not quite as unusable as some other stations on this list, so it just avoids it. Barely. Next, I have Lawndale Station on the Fox Chase line. This one has to be mentioned for 2 reasons. For one, for a station within Philadelphia itself, half of its catchment area is taken up by a golf course, so it definitely hurts its impact. And you can't even get to the golf course from the station. But the main reason I don't like it is because there's only one way to get to the station, and that involves not only crossing the tracks of the Fox Chase line itself, but also crossing an extremely busy freight corridor run by CSX. Yes, that's the only way to get to this station. So, yeah, not good from a pure safety standpoint. This is also a problem shared by 2 other stations that I will dishonorably mention as one entry, and those are Langhorne and Woodbourne stations on the West Trenton line. The problem here is that due to the track and platform layouts, where 2 tracks are owned by SEPTA and 1 is owned by CSX for freight traffic, there's only 1 platform at the station in general, because what used to be the old outbound platform was rendered unusable by CSX. As a result, it is now nearly impossible for these stations to be accessible because there is literally no platform on the outbound side, meaning everyone must walk on the tracks to get to the station. There is a way to fix this, namely by making an island platform on the outbound side and therefore splitting SEPTA and CSX further, but that means having to work with CSX, and I'm pretty sure SEPTA doesn't want to bother with that, which is pretty pathetic honestly and shows their lack of vision. Fix this problem, damn it. And finally, I feel duty-bound to mention another Wilmington Newark line station on this list because a lot of them are completely terrible and it was hard to pick out just 2 for the main list. But out of a lot of bad examples, I think Glen Olden deserves the spot. When the only meaningful amenity of the station is a trailer that you use for the waiting area in rush hours, you know your station is hot garbage. At least Glen Olden isn't the ugliest place I can imagine, so the vibes and sheer crap factor of stations on this line prevent me from ranking it higher. If you want though, you can just put any station on the Wilmington Newark line that's not in Delaware and it will probably check out fine. Okay, it's time to stop dancing around on it. Let's dive into the worst one. Number 1, North Philadelphia. This one is probably the most infuriating station of all, and for many of the same reasons as I'm frustrated with what happened to its sister station from a different mother, so to speak, in North Broad, but kicked up to 11. North Philadelphia Station was once a shining jewel for the Pennsylvania Railroad. In fact, this was the station in Philadelphia where the Pennsylvania's most legendary and luxurious train of all, the Broadway Limited, would stop to serve Philly on its run between New York and Chicago. Oh man, has this station truly fallen from those glory days. Serving as the junction station for the Trenton Line and Chestnut Hill West Line, this station is a disaster. First of all, there's the accessibility problem. At first you might think, oh, it's got level boarding, it has to be accessible. No, not in the slightest it's not. Because this station is above ground and there are no ramps up to the platform, you need an elevator to get up here. Oh yeah, there are elevator shafts here, sure, but they're broken. Completely. And they have been broken for over 30 years at this point. And the platforms on the Chestnut Hill West Line are also not accessible, being entirely low level and on a tight curve. So good bloody luck with fixing that issue just by raising platforms. Also, the bus shelter on those platforms has no glass. Yay. All of that is bad enough and would easily put it towards the top of the pile, but there's a key thing that puts it firmly at the top. For all the bad things I can say about all of the other stations on this list, there is one thing I certainly cannot say about them. They may be total messes, utter travesties even, but for the most part, they're not revolting to the senses. North Philadelphia Station, however, is. In fact, I don't exaggerate when I say that the revolting smells of this place, the trash everywhere, and the general disregard for the place make it the most disgusting train station I've yet visited in my life. And it's not even close either. And what makes it sad too is where the smell's coming from. And that's the fact that a lot of unhoused people tend to make temporary shelters here. And with no public restrooms around, you can only imagine the end result. Boy, am I glad YouTube doesn't have smell-o-vision. Don't get me wrong here, there is no disrespect coming from me to the people who take shelter here. They never deserve to be forced into this position, and they don't deserve the disrespect they get from the general public. But the overall situation here hurts both them and whatever SEPTA and Amtrak passengers choose to use this station. Both the passengers and the station's occupants suffer from the same overall problems that North Philadelphia Station, and indeed most of the transit network in general, suffers from: systemic neglect and a lack of vision. Oh yeah, and you heard me a second ago, a few Amtrak trains do stop here, mostly Keystone service trains and a Northeast regional or two. There's honestly no other regional rail station I've been where I've had to hold my nose to avoid gagging. But North Philadelphia did, and that's why it's number 1. There are currently no plans to make improvements, largely because, as my friend has found in phone calls he's made on the matter, SEPTA and Amtrak are continually passing the buck off to each other on this one. However, that's not to say that no one is interested in improving the station or the area around it, as plans for future development with both North Philadelphia and North Broad as transit nexus points have shown up now and again. And it shows what I see with the vast majority of all of these stations, even North Philly. They're certainly bad, tragic, horrid even. But despite it all, they are not unsalvageable, and they ought to be saved. And that gets to my ultimate takeaway I want to get across in this video. These stations are symbols of the myriad problems that's holding back SEPTA's regional rail and the transit system in general from being the truly great system that it has every ability and every right to be. In so many other places, train stations, even the most basic and utilitarian ones, are still treated with respect as being an essential facility of the community. And of course, in the modern day, they're built with the accessibility needs of the passengers who use it first and foremost. You ride systems like the Copenhagen S-Tog or the Stockholm Pendeltåg, and you can see that just by taking in the vibes of the stations. And their huge usage speaks for itself. If we are to be serious about making public transportation and therefore our city great, which I know there are people and politicians who want to see that, heck, I've met a few of them, and I know that staff members for certain politicians watch some of my videos, then fixing things like this is simply inescapable. There are certainly good things proposed both within the agency and among politicians, but in some cases, they just dance around the ultimate issues, which is how unappealing public transit can be to people that have the choice in getting around by car. Bad schedules and bad frequencies were one major facet, and that's for another time, and bad equipment is also another issue. But perhaps the most obvious example is the stations where people are expected to wait for your train. You don't need them to be spectacular architectural masterpieces like the Washington Metro or the Stockholm Metro, at least on the Blue Line. But something like SEPTA's newer train station designs would be leagues better than most stations we have on this list, and it would be easy to make the change too. SEPTA obviously has the tools in the toolbox to fix these problems, at least from a technical standpoint. But technical problems were never the actual problem. The biggest problem is money, the relations they have with other rail operators, and most of all, political will to actually put the money where it's needed to make meaningful changes. And while it may seem expensive to do, the reality is that avoiding this investment is far, far more expensive. You have to fix the problems or else the fare revenue won't come in because people will see the system as not worth their interest. That and fixing old stuff that breaks constantly is way more expensive anyway. You're just prolonging the inevitable. These stations not only need to be fixed because it would be nice for the people, it is an imperative that they are fixed, not least because they don't comply with the Americans with Disabilities Act and need to have accessibility improvements. The plans need to start ASAP. They should start now. And an actual effective rolling plan for all stations must be undertaken. It's part of what needs to be done, but perhaps as important as anything else, it's one of the most visible examples of what needs to be done alongside new trains and better schedules. The people need to see it to believe it, and right now, their eyes just see this, or this, or this. But they want to see and can very easily see something like this, or this, or this. It's not impossible, not in the slightest. We're already doing it, and the best cases will definitely be on my best stations list. But we need to do much, much more to usher in the needed change to the regional rail system of Philadelphia in order for the system to be a linchpin in the needed radical rework needed for the future of how we get around.